So to complete the material in chapter 12, we're going to go ahead and try that small example at the end of the chapter where we actually read from a URL on the internet and we see what happens. So let's go ahead and do that now. We're going to get a chance to enter the URL that we wish to read from, so we'll be able to do that. We're going to create a new project, new Java project, and we'll just call it URL test. We'll make a new class, also called URL test, and it'll have a main method in it somewhere. We're going to need to import java.util.scanner. So let's do that right off the bat. Import java.util.scanner. We've got our public class URL test, and we've got our main method. And let's go ahead then and begin filling in the blanks here. Well, the first thing we're going to do is print a polite little prompt asking the user to enter a URL. So we'll do system.out.print quote enter a URL colon blank. So there's our prompt. Then we're going to create a scanner called in to read from the keyboard. So we will say equals new scanner brackets system dot in, and that'll take care of that. We're then going to create ourselves a string called URL string, which is going to come from our keyboard, and we'll just do an in.next, and we'll read that string that the user is now going to enter. And now notice up above here I've left off the equal sign. Should say scanner in equals new, and that takes care of that little problem that was sitting there. Okay, now let's use the try with well, we're going to have a try block actually. So try, because exceptions can be thrown in the code that is going to be used here. We're going to try java.net.url. So we're going to define ourselves a URL object called URL, which is equal to new java.net.url, and here we are going to put in an argument representing the URL string that was entered above. We're going to make an integer called count, which we will set equal to 0 initially, and it's simply going to represent the number of characters that we read in from the URL. And we're going to also have to make a scanner to read from the URL source. So scanner URL string, or sorry, scanner input equals new scanner URL OpenStream. And it looks like I've missed a capital S right here, which we better put in to make that error go away. Now effectively what's happening, of course, is we're opening a web page and we're going to treat it as incoming text. So we're going to use a while loop to input the lines of text that arrive to us that way. and this is coming from our input scanner that we made, which is coming from the URL that we specified. So we'll check has next to see if there is still more lines to come. And as long as there is, then we will continue iterating in the while loop that I've just created here. On every iteration, we will create a string called line equal to the next line from the input. In other words, what comes in next from the web page or the URL. So input.next line, and that takes care of that. And as we reach each string, we're simply going to count the number of we're going to increase the count of characters coming in from that web page by the number of characters that were on that particular line. So we're going to use count plus equals to do that. And what we're going to add to count, which you recall was initialized at 0, is the length of this particular line that just came in. So line.length semicolon. So of course all this is going to do is open a web page, read it in as a big piece of text, and count the number of characters total that are there. That's the end of our try block. Now our catch block is going to be looking out for certain kinds of exceptions. There'll be a total of 2 catch blocks. The first of the catch blocks will look for an object of class java.net.malformed URL exception. And I'm going to save us a little bit of typing by just pasting that in from some other place. And I'm going to call that EX or X. Now what will I do in this catch block? Well, I will print system.out.println, and I will simply state that the URL was invalid. So invalid URL, because after all, we have no way of knowing if the user is going to type in a valid URL, and they might not. So if they do, this catch block will catch it and deal with it. Now, there's another possible type of exception that could get thrown, and we're going to catch that as well here. Java.io. And this is an IO exception. We'll call that EX as well. And in this catch block, we'll simply print out a message system.out.println IO errors no such file. So here we had a valid URL in terms of its form, but it referred to perhaps a web page that doesn't exist. Now, as you can see, I've messed up on my curly braces a little bit. This one ends the while loop, which means I need one for the try block here, which I will insert here. That takes care of that. But now I guess it looks like I've got an extra curly brace down here that I'm not supposed to have. And that looks like everything is where it should be now, and we should be able to go ahead and run this and see what happens. So why don't we just go ahead and try it now. Enter a URL. I'm not sure how this will work out, but why don't we try http://algomau.ca and see what that does. So far, absolutely nothing. Well, it turns out that I've missed a line of code right here. I didn't actually print the number of characters that were read. So let's go ahead and put that in right here. So in fact, what I should have done to conclude all of this was I should have done a system.out.println, the file size is, and then the count of the bytes, and then the word bytes. That's what was missing, and that's why nothing happened when I tried this earlier. So let's go ahead and try that now. So it's asking for an HTML. Let's use instead http://people.algomaU.ca/Townsend/index.html. So I hit enter, it grabs all that stuff from that URL, counts the number of bytes in total, and it finds that there's 8,079 bytes there. Not terribly interesting of a demo, but nevertheless it did work. Let's go ahead and modify this a bit so that as we pull those lines out of the file, we actually display them one at a time. That would be at least a little bit more interesting. So to do that, we just need to modify one line right here. We simply need to take the line that we've input from the web source and simply do a system.out.println on that line. That might be a little bit more interesting if we do that. So let's go ahead and run this again, and I come down here and clear this area, do a run, and I'm going to go ahead and enter that same URL, http://people.algomaU.ca/townsend/index.html. So here we go. Now what do you suppose all that was? Well, perhaps you've got some familiarity with HTML code and you've seen this before, but this is what web pages are made of. They're primarily text, but they're very specially coded text. And this is what that HTML code actually looks like. And there happens to be a total of 8,079 characters of HTML code on that web page. That then concludes chapter 12 of our textbook.